In this video, I'm going to show you how to copy and paste text from Word or some other word processor, and some of the little glitches that come up because of that, and tips. So to start out with, we're going to just add a text widget here. We go back to the Word document. I have this Word document I want to paste in. And I know I want to make this into a heading. So I'm going to start by just doing the text above that. Copy. And I highlight the text that will write over it, or you could highlight the text and delete it. Then right click. I always choose paste as plain text. I think the editor automatically does this, paste it as plain text based on what happens, but otherwise it can pull in special characters from or invisible codes from the editor and create other problems. So I always do paste as plain text. But you'll notice that one of the things that happens when you do that is that your paragraphs don't have two spaces between them, which is the key element of what I wanted to show you here. One of the key elements. There was an extra space at the bottom. I just deleted it. So we want to go through, and you can see I instantly know there are paragraphs that don't have spaces, both because I know the document, but also because you can see there's 3 paragraphs here because the edge is so ragged. So if you look over to the right of a sentence and there's room where at least one word from the next sentence would fit, then you can tell that there's basically one hard return is what I would call it from typing days. So we want to add another one. There are 3 paragraphs. So you just hit the enter key. You'll put it at the beginning of the line that you want, or at the end of the other line. So you can go here and hit enter, or you can go to the front and hit enter. That's all there is to adding the paragraphs back in. It doesn't take 2 seconds. Now let's look at the next thing. We want to add in the next thing as a heading, a subheading in H2. So I'll go ahead and copy that text for the heading. There are multiple ways of doing this, but this is the way I'm going to recommend. There are 2 headings on here that are shown. There's a small title and large title. Small title is H1, or a large title is H1, small title is H2, 3. It doesn't matter which one you pick because I want H2, and so I'm going to change it. I'm going to choose H3 and then just switch this over to an H2. Delete out where it says new title. Right click, paste as plain text. Now we have that title in there. Now add another widget underneath there for text. And this is going to be a bullet list, so that'll be a little something different to look at. I'm going to copy the bullet list. Well, I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. So I'm going to copy the bullet list because this is what most people do. Copy the bullet list, highlight this text, delete it, paste the plain text. You can see it puts in the bullets and it puts in a tab, but that's not what we want. It's not a regular bullet list at this point. So you can go through and delete all of these like this. Delete the extra line at the bottom. Now if I highlight all this and hit the bullet list, it's just like that. Now I'll show you another way to do this too. In Word, or whatever word processor you're using, you can actually turn off the bullet list. And you see it puts it on them all on their own paragraphs, and we know how that works. So if I hit copy and paste, it's plain text. Now you can see doesn't have two spaces in between each one, which is fine because we want a bullet list. So we just want one hard return after each item. Then we can hit the bullet list. And it makes it into a regular bullet list. I'll note too about the bullet lists. I like to have some space, like a little extra half space in between each bullet item. If I haven't done that on your site, then let me know and I'll add that. It has to be added as a technical. It's not a super simple thing to do. So, but I can do it for all the site by adding a couple lines of code. But just like that. And so that's how you take the text from here. And I'll include this example. I'm going to put this video on top of this example page. And there are some specific notes on here about, tips for both what we've discussed and a couple of things that we didn't discuss, things that you don't want to do, things that you do want to do. So I'd recommend you read over this for some more tips on adding text. We'll cover a couple of these real quick. You want to use short paragraphs and short sentences. It's perfectly okay to have a single sentence. It's a line. A single sentence is a paragraph. If you have multiple single sentences, at least 3, then you probably want to use a bullet list instead. But you can see how it makes it stand out. If you add too much text, you make a big long paragraph. It's like 5 or 6 or more sentences, or with really long sentences, especially. People will see that as a wall of text. And a lot of times, that makes it harder to comprehend the text, but more significantly, as far as a website person goes, most people will just skip it. The word that always comes to my mind is homework. So when you see that long paragraph of text, think of that like homework for the end user. And so you want to look and see if you can break that up. You can also make break up the sentence and make them easier to skim. People don't generally read a website. They're not going to read it like they read a book. Instead, they skim the page and look for relevant information that they're looking for. And so if you add bold, italics, and then you can also add color, although you don't want to do that too much. Preferably just like you have one highlight color that you use. Some people do that in combination with bold, especially if you're using a lighter color. It makes it so that you can have words stand out. Like we discussed, you want to have 2 spaces between each paragraph, or a space in between, I should say, 2 hard returns. You don't have indentations at the front of paragraphs like you do in some books, which is an alternative, or like the newspaper will have a tab at the beginning, an indentation. And that's really so they don't need to have double spaces. So it saves some space as far as the fixed space on a newspaper or book, whereas the website has unlimited vertical space. So that's not a necessity. And then if you try and put in a tab at the top, that's something you have to do on a technical side. It's not something you can just simply, like if you add spaces, it won't keep the spaces. If you look through this, you'll see other tips here. We'll go through those real quick. You want to use short paragraphs made up of short sentences. If you end up with a wall of text with big long sentences and or big long paragraphs, not only does that make it a little harder for the end user to digest the information, the more significant problem is that most people aren't even going to bother. They're just going to skip it. And so it's not an effectual way to communicate. You can obviously put in some of the rules of grammar and stuff are a little looser within what's typically considered okay as far as website content goes. And it's perfectly okay to have a one sentence paragraph like you see here. And you can use formatting like bold or italics or color, but you want to use that sparingly. And preferably if you use color as an fence, this one I have bolded in and a different color. It's a good idea to bold the color if it's a lighter color, especially, but you don't want to use a lot of different colors. So I would recommend that if you do use a color to highlight content, that you probably you'd use that instead of bold, like you'd use it bold color instead of bold, but also you'd use the same color throughout the document, um, throughout the whole site as the highlight color, the emphasis color, or whatever. If you use a lot of multiple colors, then it's going to look more busy. As we've basically alluded to here, we want to have spacing between each vertical spacing in between each paragraph. You don't typically indent the text, like I said. You don't need to put an extra space after a period. It won't hurt anything, but I know that's an old typing school thing that we used to do, put an extra space. You can do it. It won't hurt anything, but it's going to ignore it. Don't use underline as a style tool. And it's on there. If I could take this off, I would. But I don't recommend using underline. You can use it. It does exist like that. But when you see an underlined piece of text on a website, it's usually a link. And so if you use it like a style, like an emphasis, then people will still maybe think it's a link and try to click on it, and it'll just look like a broken link. When you copy text from a secondary source, like we're discussing in Word or whatever word processor you use, you don't need to worry about adding things like italics and bold, and the bullet list is a little in between just because it's easier. Or like if you had the heading format, you don't have to add in that formatting into the text document, because when you copy and paste it, you're going to have to redo that work. The only difference or the only exception to that would be if you're sending the information to someone else to put into the website, then you'd want to do the formatting to show them what you want, assuming that you want to show them what you want to do, as opposed to leaving it to their judgment. So that's all I had for this simple video on adding text, and hopefully that takes care of some common issues. Thanks.